try to give myself grace. Everybody says give yourself grace. It's so hard for me to do that. At the end of the day, it's my fault, and not that everybody.
The basketball world was left absolutely stunned as history unfolded before our very eyes, a moment so unexpected, so impossible to predict that analysts, fans, and even former players were left scrambling for answers. The Indiana Fever, a team written off as broken, beaten and battered, stormed into the WNBA semifinals for the first time since 2015. Doing the unthinkable without their superstar Caitlin Clark and with 6 key players sidelined. This wasn't just a playoff win. This was a seismic shift that rattled the very foundation of the league. Think about the sheer magnitude of this moment. Brittney Griner, a legend who for years dominated the paint, sat on the bench with tears streaming down her face, powerless to stop the onslaught, while Aliyah Boston, a player who represents the future of the league, lifted her teammates on her back and carried them into the Final Four with sheer grit and unrelenting determination. Inside the Gateway Center Arena, the atmosphere was electric. A clash of desperation and hope. The crowd split between Atlanta Dream faithful and Fever fans who traveled to witness history. As the game progressed, those Fever fans grew louder, their voices drowning out the home crowd, turning a road elimination game into something that felt like Indianapolis itself had been transplanted into Atlanta. What makes this story so unbelievable is the context. Caitlin Clark, the face of the franchise and the league's biggest star, wasn't just missing. She was on the bench, unable to play, but refusing to let her team feel abandoned. Alongside her, Sophie Cunningham, Sydney Colson, Chloe Bai, Ari McDonald, and Darius Dantas sat in street clothes, cheering, strategizing, and coaching their teammates through every possession. Practically half of head coach Stephanie White's rotation was out, leaving the Fever undermanned, undersized, and, according to every expert, outmatched. And yet, when the final buzzer sounded, it was the Fever who stood victorious, breaking nearly a decade of playoff frustration. The last time Indiana advanced this far, Tamika Catchings was still leading the franchise. Stephanie White was guiding them as a coach to a finals appearance, and Natasha Howard was just breaking into the league. Fast forward to now, and this same franchise was expected to fall quietly, especially against an Atlanta team that came in with depth, health, and home court advantage. Instead, the Fever played like warriors who simply refused to die. Game 3 wasn't just basketball. It was a battle of willpower and heart. Atlanta threw everything they had at Indiana. Their athletes, their shooters, their size. And still, Indiana pushed back with relentless defense and timely shot-making. Kelsey Mitchell came out blazing from the opening tip, slicing through Atlanta's defense and scoring 19 first-half points to keep her team within striking distance. Odyssey Sims, a player who was never supposed to be in this position, rose to the moment like a seasoned veteran, tallying 16 points and 8 assists while orchestrating the offense with poise. Every player on the Fever roster contributed in ways that defied logic. Lexi Hull, often overlooked, delivered the defensive play of the season when she stole the ball in the final seconds, ripping away Atlanta's last hope of a miracle comeback and sealing the win. Even players with limited minutes made their presence felt. Michaela Timson played just 4 minutes, but grabbed 5 crucial rebounds. And Shapetti drilled a clutch three-pointer that swung momentum in Indiana's favor late in the game. This was a team victory in every sense of the word. But make no mistake, at the heart of it all stood Aliyah Boston. Her stat line of 14 points, 12 rebounds, and 6 assists only begins to tell the story. It was the timing of her plays that truly defined the game. With the clock winding down and the Fever trailing, Boston muscled her way into position, caught a perfect feed from Sims, and scored the go-ahead layup with just 7.4 seconds left. That basket didn't just win the game. It announced to the world that Boston wasn't just a rising star. She was ready to take the throne. On the opposite end, Brittney Griner, the former queen of the paint, sat helpless, her frustration etched across her face. Once feared for her dominance in elimination games, Griner found herself relegated to the bench, her coach no longer trusting her to finish the fight. That single image, Boston celebrating as Griner sat defeated, symbolized a passing of the torch. For years, Griner was the gold standard, a player whose mere presence changed games. Now, it was Boston who controlled the narrative while Griner faced questions about her future. Could this be the end for one of the league's greatest centers? Fans couldn't believe what they were witnessing. This wasn't supposed to happen. Not with Indiana missing so much firepower. Not with Atlanta fully healthy and playing at home. But heart, chemistry, and unshakable belief can rewrite any script. As the final horn blared and the Fever players mobbed each other in celebration, the cameras captured raw emotion, Boston lifting her teammates in joy. Sims screaming in triumph, Mitchell collapsing to the floor in tears. Stephanie White's post-game speech perfectly captured the moment. "Y'all are a tough bunch. I can't even put into words how proud I am. It doesn't matter the circumstance, the score, or the time, you always put your best foot forward." Those words weren't just about one game. They were about a franchise rediscovering its soul, a team refusing to be defined by injuries or doubt. The Fever didn't just win a series. They reclaimed their identity. And now, they march into the semifinals. Ready to face an entirely new level of challenge. The two-time champion Las Vegas Aces, led by the unstoppable A'ja Wilson. But before we look ahead, it's worth pausing to recognize what we just witnessed. In a league where stars usually decide games, this was a victory for depth, resilience, and sheer will. It was a night when role players became heroes, when adversity became fuel, and when an underdog team reminded everyone why we love sports. Indiana's journey is far from over, but one thing is clear. The Fever are no longer rebuilding. They are here and they are ready to fight for a championship. Fight for a championship. This was more than just a basketball game. It was a symbolic clash between the past and the future. A battle fought not only on the scoreboard, but also in the hearts and minds of every fan who has followed this league for the last decade. The moment the cameras captured Brittney Griner sitting on the bench, tears welling in her eyes as she realized the torch had been passed, was the kind of image that will live forever in WNBA history. For years, Griner had been the undisputed queen of the paint. A player whose sheer presence altered the trajectory of games, whose blocked shots and thunderous finishes left opponents demoralized. But on this night, inside the Gateway Center arena, Griner wasn't the unstoppable force she once was. Instead, she was forced to watch as Aliyah Boston, a player young enough to have grown up idolizing her, completely dominated the court and dismantled her legacy piece by piece. The signs of trouble were there early in the series. Griner looked slow on her rotations, her footwork just a step behind, her reactions a half-second late. She missed easy layups. She used to finish in her sleep. On defense, she found herself constantly out of position as Boston outworked and outmaneuvered her. By the time Game 3 rolled around, those cracks in Griner's game had widened into gaping holes, and Stephanie White's Fever were determined to exploit them. Boston didn't just beat Griner physically, she broke her mentally. From the very first possession, Boston established deep position in the paint, using her strength and low center of gravity to push Griner off her favorite spots. Instead of chasing highlight blocks or forcing risky moves, Boston played with surgical precision, angling her body perfectly to deny Griner the space she craved. Every time Griner tried to back her down, Boston held her ground like a brick wall, forcing fadeaways and awkward hooks that clanged off the rim. You could see the frustration building on Griner's face as the game wore on. There's a profound difference between losing because someone is simply more talented and losing because someone takes away every single thing you've built your career on. That's what Boston did to Griner. She stripped her of her identity as the league's most dominant center and replaced it with doubt. The numbers tell the story in stark detail. Griner, who for much of her prime averaged double-digit points and rebounds with ease, finished this game with just 2 points and 2 rebounds. A stat line so unthinkable it felt almost like a typo. Compare that to Boston's 14 points, 12 rebounds, and 6 assists, and the contrast becomes even more glaring. But stats alone don't capture the magnitude of this moment. It wasn't just that Boston outplayed Griner. It was when she did it. With the season on the line and the clock ticking down, Boston sealed deep, caught a perfect feed from Odyssey Sims, and powered home the go-ahead layup with 7.4 seconds left. The crowd gasped. The Fever bench erupted. Griner sat silent. That single play didn't just win the game, it ended an era. Immediately after the final buzzer, Griner didn't storm off the court or lash out in anger. Instead, she sat quietly, processing what had just happened. When she finally spoke to reporters, her words were raw and heartbreaking. "I don't think I've really gotten through all the way that I didn't let down everybody, my teammates, my family, my fans," she said, her voice breaking. "Everyone keeps telling me to give myself grace, but it's so hard. At the end of the day, it's my fault. I let everyone down." It was a rare glimpse into the mind of a superstar grappling with the possibility that her time at the top might be over. When a coach benches you in an elimination game, it's not just about one bad night. It's a signal that trust has been lost, that the team is already planning for life without you. And that's exactly what happened to Griner. As Atlanta's season hung in the balance, their legendary center sat on the sideline, powerless to change the outcome. That image will haunt her and maybe define the twilight of her career. The conversation now turns to what comes next. Is this the end of Brittney Griner as a dominant force in the WNBA? Retirement whispers are already swirling. Some analysts believe she's simply slowing down with age, her body no longer able to endure the physical toll of playing at an elite level. Others think this was less about decline and more about Boston's greatness. A young star announcing herself by toppling the old guard. Either way, the symbolism is impossible to ignore. For over a decade, when you thought of playoff basketball in the paint, you thought of Brittney Griner. She was the gold standard, the player every young big measured themselves against. On this night, that standard shifted. Aliyah Boston didn't just win a game, she claimed the crown. The way she carried herself throughout this series was nothing short of remarkable. She didn't talk trash or try to humiliate her opponent. She simply played with an unshakable calm, letting her game speak for itself. When the Fever needed a basket, she delivered. When they needed a stop, she was there. Her performance in Game 3 was a masterclass in timing and poise. She didn't chase stats. She didn't force plays. She simply did whatever her team needed, whenever they needed it. That kind of leadership is rare, especially in someone so young. Watching her interact with teammates was like watching a seasoned veteran. She celebrated their successes more than her own, constantly encouraging, constantly pushing them forward. It's no wonder her teammates rallied around her. Even Caitlin Clark, sidelined with injury, was up and shouting from the bench every time Boston made a big play. The Fever's sideline looked less like a group of injured players and more like a second coaching staff. Cunningham acted like an assistant coach, drawing up ideas during timeouts. Chloe Bai brought relentless energy, hyping up teammates before every defensive possession. That collective spirit mattered, especially when the officiating drama from earlier games threatened to derail their focus. In Games 1 and 2, questionable calls and missed whistles had sparked anger across the league. Social media exploded with outrage, fans demanding accountability. But when Game 3 arrived, the Fever didn't let those distractions creep in. They stayed locked in, blocking out the noise, and played their most disciplined basketball of the season. That composure came directly from Boston's example. While Griner let frustration show on her face, Boston remained unflappable, and her teammates mirrored that attitude. It's easy to see why analysts are already comparing this series to some of the great passing of the torch moments in sports history. Think Michael Jordan defeating Magic Johnson in the 1991 NBA Finals? Or Serena Williams toppling champions who once ruled the tennis world? These are moments when the balance of power shifts before our very eyes, and once it happens, there's no going back. Brittney Griner will always be remembered as one of the league's greats, but on this night, she became part of the past. Aliyah Boston became the present and the future. This matchup also highlighted a philosophical shift in the game itself. Griner's dominance was built on sheer size and athleticism. She towered over opponents, used her wingspan to block shots and altered trajectories, and overwhelmed defenders with her physical gifts. Boston represents a new breed of big. She combines strength with skill, positioning with vision. Her 6 assists weren't just a stat. They were proof of a player who sees the game like a point guard while battling in the trenches like a center. That versatility makes her a nightmare to guard. When defenses collapse to stop her scoring, she finds open teammates. When they play her straight up, she goes to work on the block. It's a level of sophistication that even Griner in her prime didn't fully possess. For Indiana, this victory was validation of their long-term vision. Drafting Boston wasn't just about adding talent. It was about building a foundation, creating an identity that could sustain success for years to come. And in this series, that vision came to life. With Caitlin Clark out, many assumed the Fever would crumble. Instead, they thrived, proving that their future isn't dependent on one superstar alone. That depth of resilience sends a message to the rest of the league. Indiana is coming, and they're not going away anytime soon. Meanwhile, for Atlanta, tough questions loom. How do you move forward when your franchise cornerstone is visibly fading? Do you double down and hope Griner has one last great run in her? Or do you start planning for a rebuild around younger pieces like Ryan Howard? The way this series ended will force some painful conversations in Atlanta's front office. For now, though, the spotlight belongs to Boston and the Fever. This was their night, their moment, their statement to the world. And as the confetti fell and the Fever players celebrated with their fans, you could sense that this wasn't just the end of a series. It was the beginning of a new era. Aliyah Boston didn't just dethrone Brittney Griner. She changed the balance of power in the WNBA. And now, the Las Vegas Aces waiting in the semifinals, the question isn't whether Boston is ready for the moment. It's whether the league is ready for her. It's whether the league is ready for her. The final buzzer had barely sounded on Indiana's historic victory over the Atlanta Dream when attention immediately shifted to what comes next, a monumental showdown against the defending champions, the Las Vegas Aces. This isn't just another playoff series. This is the kind of matchup that defines legacies, the type of clash that fans and analysts will be talking about for years to come. On one side, you have the Fever, a young and hungry team led by Aliyah Boston and powered by a sense of destiny. They've been counted out, doubted, and dismissed all season, especially after losing Caitlin Clark to a devastating injury. Yet here they stand, having shocked the basketball world by toppling Atlanta and proving they're far more than just a one-star show. On the other side stand the Aces, a juggernaut that has ruled the WNBA landscape for the past 2 seasons with a combination of overwhelming talent, veteran leadership, and cold-blooded execution in the clutch. Led by A'ja Wilson, arguably the most dominant player in the league today. The Aces represent everything. The Fever aspire to become experienced, battle-tested, and accustomed to the pressure of big games. For the Fever, this series isn't just about advancing to the finals. It's about sending a message to the entire league that Indiana's resurgence isn't a fluke, that their rise to power is real and sustainable. Beating Atlanta was impressive, but defeating Las Vegas would be something else entirely. The Aces are not only the reigning champions, but also a team with one of the most lethal lineups in basketball. A'ja Wilson is a 2-time MVP and a defensive anchor who can change the course of a game with a single play. Alongside her, Chelsea Gray serves as the cerebral engine of the offense, orchestrating possessions with pinpoint passing and unshakable composure. Then there's Kelsey Plum, a fiery scorer capable of taking over quarters with her outside shooting. And Jackie Young, a versatile wing who thrives on both ends of the court. This core has been through wars together. They've faced elimination games, hostile crowds, and every possible obstacle, and they've come out stronger each time. For the Fever to beat them, they'll need to play their best basketball of the season, and then some. The chess match between coaches may prove just as pivotal as the battle on the court. Stephanie White, who has guided Indiana through turbulence and triumph alike, must find a way to counter Becky Hammon, one of the most respected tactical minds in the game. Hammon has a knack for making in-game adjustments that leave opponents scrambling. She's not afraid to completely change her team's look mid-series, throwing out unexpected defensive schemes or unleashing lineups no one saw coming. For White, preparation will be key. She knows the Aces will focus heavily on containing Boston, likely throwing double teams at her every time she touches the ball. That means Indiana's role players must step up in ways they never have before. Kelsey Mitchell's scoring will be crucial, especially her ability to stretch the floor and punish Las Vegas for overcommitting inside. Lexi Hull's defensive tenacity and three-point shooting could swing a game if she stays aggressive. And veterans like Odyssey Sims will need to bring poise and leadership, especially in the chaotic moments when momentum swings wildly. The loss of Caitlin Clark looms large over this matchup. Clark's playmaking and long-range shooting would have been invaluable against a team like Las Vegas. Without her, Indiana must rely on collective execution rather than individual brilliance. That's not necessarily a disadvantage, it just means the Fever will have to win with depth, discipline, and relentless effort. Boston will undoubtedly draw the headlines, but this series might come down to the unsung heroes. Someone unexpected will need to have a breakout performance. Whether it's a bench player hitting clutch shots or a defensive specialist shutting down one of Las Vegas's stars. From a strategic standpoint, Indiana's path to victory hinges on three key factors. First, they must control the glass. The Aces thrive on second chance points and fast break opportunities created by rebounds. Boston's dominance on the boards will be essential, but she can't do it alone. Aliyah Boston will need help from Nalissa Smith and even guards crashing in to secure rebounds. Second, Indiana must protect the ball. Turnovers against Las Vegas are essentially a death sentence because the Aces convert them into easy transition points with brutal efficiency. Lastly, the Fever must hit their outside shots. Las Vegas will likely pack the paint to contain Boston, daring Indiana's shooters to beat them from beyond the arc. If Mitchell, Hull, and others can make the Aces pay, the series dynamic shifts dramatically. Off the court, the narrative surrounding this series is already electric. Pundits are calling it a classic David versus Goliath battle, with the young, unproven Fever trying to topple a dynasty in its prime. Social media is ablaze with debates over whether Boston can outduel Wilson, whether Stephanie White can outcoach Hammon, and whether Indiana's miracle run can continue. Tickets for the opening game in Las Vegas sold out within hours, and resale prices are skyrocketing, a clear sign of just how massive the stakes are. Television networks are banking on huge ratings, framing the series as must-see drama. Even casual sports fans are paying attention, intrigued by the contrast between the star-studded, championship-tested Aces and the scrappy, fearless Fever. Adding even more intrigue is the personal history between some of the key players. A'ja Wilson and Aliyah Boston share a connection that dates back to their college days at South Carolina, where Wilson once served as a mentor to Boston. Now, that relationship adds layers of complexity to their matchup. Wilson has spoken openly about her pride in Boston's growth. But make no mistake, she'll do everything in her power to crush her former protege on the court. For Boston, this series represents the ultimate test. It's one thing to dominate a fading legend like Brittney Griner. It's another to go toe-to-toe with the reigning queen of the WNBA in her absolute prime. The emotional stakes couldn't be higher. For the Fever, reaching the finals would be validation for years of rebuilding and heartbreak. It would cement Boston's status as not just a rising star, but a legitimate franchise cornerstone capable of leading Indiana back to glory. For the Aces, anything less than another championship would be considered a failure. They've set a standard of excellence that demands nothing short of perfection. That pressure can be both a motivator and a burden, and how Las Vegas handles it could determine